Viewers, I can be kind and say that the government's only letting in 1,500 people a day, but that number varies. I don't know if you've noticed on the highways or anything like that, usually on the weekends you get major traffic, mass traffic on the highways or in peak hours. But have you noticed lately that even in the middle of the day, the mass amount of cars that's a result of immigration? Welcome, viewers, to mass Australian political vote harvesting, when the farm depended on the next harvest. What happens when a farm can no longer afford the harvest to fail? Everything changes. The farmer's no longer simply growing a crop. The entire operation becomes dependent upon producing another successful season. Within this behavioural political thesis, the same question is applied to democratic incentives. If political leadership ever came to believe that continued electoral success depended partly upon maintaining high levels of immigration, the policy itself could gradually shift from being one option among many to becoming strategically difficult to reverse, and that's what's happened in Australia. Not because every migrant votes the same. They don't. That's the risk of mass immigration. That the reason for the cause may not produce the result intended. It's all rickshaw. It's using Australia as a Ponzi guessing, put your hand into the hat and watch me pull a rabbit out of the hat type style of politics. But because it's had reasonable success, the politicians will push and push and push until the standard civilians of that nation drown under foreigners. But because institutions may become increasingly reluctant to disturb a process they perceive as continuing to long-term electoral advantage, immigration continues in mass, primarily unvetted amounts. The farming cycle now changes. The next harvest is no longer desirable. It becomes necessary for the politicians to have more of a chance of keeping their jobs. Every season carries pressure to preserve the conditions that produced the previous one. Every proposal is elevated against the possibility of reducing the next yield. And within this fictional framework, electoral strategy risks becoming self-reinforcing. Higher intake expands future citizenship. Future citizenship expands the electorate. The electorate reshapes political calculations, and the calculations influence future policy. And the cycle repeats. But it only repeats until something breaks, because eventually something will break and it'll be a catastrophic event. As each season passes, questioning the cycle itself may become politically expensive. Attention shifts away from asking whether the original policy remains appropriate and towards protecting the conditions that keep the cycle operating. And the central democratic concern is therefore not immigration itself. Immigration can serve legitimate economic, humanitarian, educational, family, labour market and security purposes. The concern examined by this thesis is different. What happens if preserving future electoral advantage, viewers, becomes one of the incentives encouraging the continuation of bulk migration? I want to say that again. What happens if preserving future electoral advantage for these politicians becomes one of the incentives encouraging the continuation of mass bulk migration? Because once an institution becomes dependent upon a migration harvest, its greatest fear is not planting. That means they're compelled to continue the mass migration. And its greatest fear, the politician's greatest fear, is a season that produces less votes than the last.